As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet cemetery, I made my way through the weathered iron gates, a bundle of candles clutched tightly in my trembling hands. The air was thick with an eerie silence as I walked through the iron gates, each creak echoing through the desolate graveyard. The pale moon cast long, haunting shadows, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Each year, on the anniversary of his passing, I returned to this hallowed ground to pay tribute to my late father. My father, strict yet loving, was a man of unwavering principles. He believed in perfection and in striving for excellence in every aspect of life. But beneath his stern exterior beat a heart filled with boundless love and unwavering devotion. I remember the way his eyes would light up with pride whenever I achieved something, no matter how small. He pushed me to be the best version of myself, urging me to reach for the stars even when the world seemed determined to hold me back. But then came the diagnosis, a cruel sentence whispered by fate's capricious hand. Liver disease, they said, gnawing away at him from the inside out. And though he fought with every ounce of strength he possessed, the battle was one he could not win. He passed away when I was just 14, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. The pain of his absence cut deep, a wound that refused to heal, a constant reminder of all that had been lost. As I approached my father's resting place, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive, as if the very earth itself recoiled from my presence. The tombstones around me seemed to lean in closer, their inscriptions obscured by layers of moss and decay, hiding the secrets of the souls they housed. A sudden gust of wind whispered through the gnarled branches of the surrounding trees, their twisted limbs reaching out like skeletal fingers grasping for purchase in the night. The sound sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched by unseen eyes hiding in the darkness. With trembling hands, I knelt beside my father's grave, the cold stone biting into my knees. The bouquet I had brought seemed to wither in the moonlight, its vibrant colors drained by the oppressive atmosphere. As I placed the flowers upon the grave, a sense of unease washed over me, like a wave of icy water crashing against my soul. The air grew thick with an otherworldly presence, and I could feel the weight of centuries pressing down upon me, suffocating me with their collective sorrow and longing. And then, from the depths of the darkness, a mournful wail pierced the silence, its anguished cry echoing through the graveyard like a lamentation from beyond the veil of death. It was a sound that spoke of untold suffering and unbearable loss, a chorus of souls trapped between this world and the next. My heart hammered in my chest as I searched for the source of the sound, but there was nothing to be seen save for the shadowy figures that danced on the periphery of my vision, their movements fluid and ethereal. A sudden unease enveloped me, and the darkness seemed to close in. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the gloomy surroundings. But as I stood, a flickering light in the distance caught my eye. It was an old wet-thread lantern swaying eerily, casting peculiar shadows amongst the tombstones. With a pounding heart, I began to walk away from the grave. But as I turned, I glimpsed a figure in the corner of my eye, a shadowy silhouette, hauntingly resembling my father. My breath caught, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. As my father's figure emerged from the shadows, he appeared ghastly pale, his features contorted into a visage of ancient dread and sorrow. His eyes, once warm and familiar, now glowed with an eerie luminescence that sent shivers down my spine. It was as though he had been plucked from the depths of a nightmare. A specter of the past came to haunt me in the present. "Is it really you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure seemed to draw closer, its features obscured in the darkness. Panic surged through me and I stumbled backward. But then a soft, familiar voice filled the air, a voice I hadn't heard in years. "My child, fear not. It is I." Despite the overwhelming fear that gripped my heart, there was no denying the love and concern that radiated from his ghostly form. My father's apparition stepped into the dim light, and I felt a mixture of relief and terror. He looked ethereal, almost translucent, yet undeniably present. He reassured me, expressing love and peace from the other realm. But as the wind picked up and the lanterns flickered violently, his form seemed to waver, and a sudden dread enveloped me. "Go," he whispered. "Leave this place before it claims you too." His voice, though faint and distant, carried the weight of 1,000 whispered prayers, each word a plea for my safety and well-being. I could see the anguish etched upon his spectral face, the pain of his torment mirrored in the depths of his haunted eyes. It was a cruel paradox to be comforted by the presence of the very thing that filled me with such overwhelming terror. In a frenzy, I turned and sprinted towards the gates. But try as I might, escape eluded me, the gates looming like an impassable barrier between myself and the safety of the outside world. With the feeling of being watched with 1,000 unseen eyes boring into my very soul, stripping away the veneer of my humanity until all that remained was raw, primal fear. As I glanced back one last time, I saw the figure of my father fade into the shadows. With a sense of mounting dread, I realized that I was not alone in the cemetery, that there were spirits here, restless and tormented, reaching out to me from the darkness with spectral hands. With a final surge of adrenaline, I threw myself through the gates and into the cold embrace of the night, the echoes of my father's warning ringing in my ears like a funeral dirge. But even as I fled, I could feel the ease of the deed upon me, their silent accusations piercing through the veil of my sanity. At that moment, I knew that I had trespassed upon the sacred ground, and that the price of my intrusion would be steep indeed. But even as fear threatened to consume me, I remained steadfast in my purpose, determined to honor my father's memory no matter the cost. The memory of that night still haunts me, a reminder of the thin veil between the world of the living and the realm of the departed. It remains an enigma, forever etched in my mind, the night I felt my father's presence, both a comforting embrace and a spine-chilling premonition. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind that seemed to belong in horror stories. The rain hammered against the windows, the wind howled like a banshee, and lightning split the sky with jagged bolts of light. Legend has it that St. Mark's Hospital is not merely a place of healing, but a realm where the veil between the living and the dead grows thin. Whispers of its haunted corridors have long haunted the town, tales passed down from generation to generation like a macabre inheritance. Within the imposing walls of St. Mark's, shadows dance to a tune of their creation, twisted and contorted by unseen forces. Patients and staff alike speak of eerie encounters, ghostly apparitions that drift silently through the halls, their spectral forms flickering in and out of existence like whispers on the wind. The air hangs heavy with the weight of restless spirits, their presence felt by those brave enough to venture into the hospital's depths. Strange sounds echo in the dead of night, disembodied footsteps that tread the empty corridors, ghostly moans that pierce the silence like knives in the darkness. Many believe that St. Mark's Hospital is cursed, a cursed place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur and intertwine. They say that the souls of those who have passed within its walls linger on, trapped in a purgatory of their own making, their anguished cries echoing through the endless labyrinth of hallways and wards. Despite the ominous warnings and the raging storm that threatened to engulf the night, I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity, and found myself standing before the imposing structure of St. Mark's Hospital. The rain pelted down relentlessly, each drop a chilling reminder of the tales whispered in hushed tones about this dreaded place. I had come to visit a sick friend on the top floor, a gesture of friendship and solidarity in their time of need. Little did I know that this simple act of compassion would lead me into the heart of darkness itself. Each step seemed to echo with a hollow resonance, as if warning me of the peril that lay ahead. The air grew colder with every passing moment, thick with the weight of unspoken dread that hung like a shroud around me. Stepping through the hospital's automatic doors, I was greeted by the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the antiseptic scent of disinfectant. The atmosphere was suffocating, a stark contrast to the raging storm outside. With each passing second, the sterile white walls seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with their clinical aura. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights echoed in the emptiness, amplifying the eerie stillness that hung in the air like a shroud. As I made my way to the elevator bank, A sense of unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. The hospital seemed deserted, devoid of the usual hustle and bustle one would expect to find in such a place. Ignoring the chill that crept up my spine, I pressed the call button for the elevator and waited. Moments passed like hours, the silence broken only by the steady drip of rain outside. Finally, with a soft ding, the doors slid open, revealing the empty interior of the elevator. Stepping inside, I pressed the button for the top floor and watched as the doors closed behind me. When the elevator doors finally slid open with a mechanical hiss, I hesitated, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of stepping into that empty metal box. But with no other option, I stepped inside, the doors closing behind me with a finality that sent a chill down my spine. As the elevator began its ascent, the silence became deafening, broken only by the low hum of the machinery. Each floor passed by in agonizing slowness, the digital display ticking off the numbers with a mechanical precision that only added to my growing sense of unease. The ascent was slow and steady, the only sound the gentle whir of machinery. But as the elevator climbed higher, a sense of unease gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. It was as if something sinister lurked just beyond the reach of my senses, waiting to pounce. And then, without warning, the elevator lurched to a stop between floors, plunging me into darkness. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind as I frantically pressed the buttons, willing the doors to open and release me from this suffocating tomb. But there was no response, no sign of life from the outside world. Trapped in the belly of the hospital, with nothing but the oppressive darkness and the distant rumble of thunder to keep me company, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. Panic surged through me as I reached for the emergency button, desperate for any sign of help. But as I pressed it, the intercom crackled to life, emitting a burst of static that sent a chill down my spine. And then, a voice unlike any I had ever heard before, whispered through the speaker, its words distorted and unnatural. It spoke in hushed tones, uttering cryptic phrases that sent shivers racing down my spine. I tried to make sense of the words, to decipher their hidden meaning, but they eluded me like smoke slipping through my fingers. With each passing moment, the sense of dread that hung in the air grew stronger, wrapping around me like a suffocating embrace. And then, as if from nowhere, I began to hear it, the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness, drawing closer with each passing second. They were soft, almost imperceptible, but there was no mistaking their approach. My pulse quickened as I strained to listen, my ears tuned to the slightest sound. But try as I might, I could discern nothing beyond the walls of the elevator, nothing but the oppressive silence of the night. Minutes stretched into eternity as I waited, my heart pounding in my chest like a drumbeat of dread. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, a prisoner in a world where reality and illusion blurred together in a maelstrom of terror. And then, just when I thought I could bear it no longer, the elevator jolted to life with a bone-rattling crash, sending me lurching against the walls. The lights flickered with renewed intensity, casting eerie shadows that danced across the metal walls. The voice on the intercom grew louder, its whispers rising to a fevered pitch. It was as if the very air itself was alive with the sound, vibrating with a primal energy that threatened to consume me whole. And then, with a final, gut-wrenching lurch, the elevator came to a sudden stop. The lights went out completely, plunging me into a darkness so thick I could scarcely see my hand in front of my face. The elevator ride turned into a nightmare as the lights flickered off, plunging me into a suffocating darkness. A chill crept up my spine, a sensation that something, lurked just beyond my sight. My attempts to remain composed shattered as fear gripped me like a vice, and I cried out for help, my voice trembling with terror. Desperation guided my trembling hands as I fumbled for any means of escape, but the darkness seemed to mock my efforts, swallowing my cries and leaving me stranded in its icy embrace. Then, as suddenly as it had disappeared, the light flooded back into the elevator, revealing emptiness. But the relief was short-lived. On the 7th floor, a figure emerged, cloaked in shadow, their head bowed in an unnerving display of anonymity. My voice caught in my throat as I attempted to address them, but before I could utter a word, darkness enveloped us once more. I mustered the courage to inquire about their well-being, my words hanging in the air like a desperate plea for sanity. Yet, silence was the only response, a haunting reminder of the solitude that engulfed us in that confined space. As the elevator ascended to the 9th floor, the lights flickered back to life, revealing an empty carriage. The elevator was empty, devoid of any living presence. The voice on the intercom had fallen silent, and the eerie footsteps had ceased. The mysterious woman had vanished into the abyss, leaving me to grapple with the unsettling reality of what transpired. Dread lingered in the air like a palpable presence, casting a shadow over my every thought as I stepped out into the unknown. Instinct took over as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for some source of light in the suffocating blackness. With trembling hands, I managed to unlock the screen, casting a feeble glow that illuminated the tiny enclosure. And what I saw in that moment will haunt me until the end of my days. As I stepped out onto the 9th floor, the lingering sense of unease clung to me like a sinister fog. The sterile hallway stretched before me, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights that seemed to cast long, eerie shadows on the linoleum floor. Despite the return of light, the memory of the mysterious woman's presence haunted me like a ghostly apparition. How had she vanished without a trace? And what dark secrets lay hidden within the labyrinthine corridors of St. Mark's Hospital? Every creak of the floorboards echoed through the empty halls, every flicker of the lights sending a jolt of fear coursing through my veins. It was as if the very walls themselves whispered of unspeakable horrors that lurked just beyond the threshold of perception. With each step, the sense of dread intensified, gnawing at the edges of my sanity like a ravenous beast. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move with malevolent intent. But despite the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume me, I pressed on, driven by a primal instinct to unravel the mysteries that lay hidden within the bowels of St. Mark's Hospital. Little did I know that with each step forward, I drew closer to the heart of darkness itself, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred into oblivion. With trepidation gripping my every step, I made my way slowly down the corridor toward my friend's hospital room. The sterile surroundings offered little comfort as I wrestled with the unsettling events that had unfolded in the elevator. Despite the urge to confide in my friend about the chilling encounter, fear held me in its icy grip. How could I begin to explain the inexplicable, palpable sense of unease that still lingered in the air like a malevolent specter? As I reached the door to my friend's room, I hesitated, my hand hovering uncertainly over the handle. The weight of the unspoken truth hung heavy upon me, a burden too great to bear alone. But as I stepped into the room, the sight of my friend lying frail and vulnerable in the hospital bed banished all thoughts of my fears. Their eyes, clouded with pain and uncertainty, searched mine for reassurance, for solace amid their suffering. And in that moment, I knew that I couldn't burden them with the weight of my terror. I forced a smile, masking the turmoil that churned within me, and took a seat by their bedside. Though the memory of the mysterious encounter burned brightly in the recesses of my mind, I pushed it aside, focusing instead on providing whatever comfort I could to my friend in their time of need. For sometimes the greatest act of courage lies not in confronting our fears, but in shielding those we care about from the darkness that threatens to consume us all. And so, with a heavy heart and a silent prayer for strength, I resolved to face the unknown alone, lest it cast its shadow upon those I held most dear.